Welcome to Kent Hance, the best storyteller in Texas podcast. Thanks for being with us. We hope you check back often and also go back through our past episodes. There's a lot of great stuff there, some great interviews that you should check out. So scroll through it and find one you like and give it a listen. We start every episode with the saying of the day. What do you
saying of the day goes back a few years to one step for man, one giant step for mankind. And that was when they landed on the moon. Mm-hmm. And that's been that was in 1969, so it's been 46 years. No, let me see.
56.
56. Yeah. Don't want to cheat them out of the end of their years. In 56 years since that happened. And, I think at that time when that happened, a lot of us thought we'll be in Mars in another 5 years. But the Congress didn't keep up with the spending on that. Mm-hmm. One of the few things they didn't continue to spend a lot on. And you look at the space program, that the vinyl that we put on houses today for insulation came out of that space program.
Right.
So a lot of good things came out of it. But they slowed down on the contributions by the federal government and NASA. They still had some, but not enough that they were going to go to Mars or have a colony on the moon.
Where were you when Neil Armstrong walked on the moon?
I was arguing with Fastball Walker at my house, and there was a preseason game, and they're not having them this year as early as they used to, but it was a Colts, and I forget who the Colts were playing, but Fastball wanted to switch it over to see what the score was, and I wanted to see the land of the moon, and he gave me a big bad time for that for a long time. That I had a chance to see football actually happening. You want to see some guy walk on the moon. The other thing I've mentioned on this program before is that my friend Snake Adams was watching it in Dimmitt, Texas, my old hometown, at the VFW. And at the VFW, everybody was glued to the TV watching man make a step on the moon. And Snake said, hell, I've been there. And somebody said, you hadn't been to the moon? He said, that's not the moon. That's between Gallup and Farmington, New Mexico. And somebody looked and said, by God, it does look like that, doesn't it? It may be between Gallup and Farmington. And that was always his quick comeback on. I've been there. It's not the moon. It's just a place in New Mexico.
Snake.
And he was pretty funny. I noticed that Stephen Colbert, CBS dropped him, and I wonder what took so long. CBS, it seems to me, with all the changes they're making, the numbers guys have gotten in control. And if you don't make money, you're gone. And that's the way it should be. Stephen Colbert was always, he hated Trump, and that was his prerogative. And so he spent all of his time on him. And we've got a clip here by Johnny Carson that really explains what has happened to the late night people, the Tonight Show type people.
People say he'll never take a serious controversy. Well, I have an answer to that. I said, now, tell me the last time that Jack Benny, Red Skelton, any comedian, used his show to do serious issues. That's not what I'm there for. Can't they see that? But you're not. Why do they think that just because you have a Tonight Show that you must deal in serious issues? That's a danger. It's a real danger. Once you start that, you start to get that self-important feeling that what you say has great import. And strangely enough, you could use that show as a forum. You could sway people, and I don't think you should as an entertainer.
That's great. I mean, Johnny Carson I always watched the 10:30 show, at least the monologue, and he'd have some great things to say, and he was excellent. But he said, if you start talking about serious issues, you'll get to thinking you're smarter than you are. You'll take yourself so serious. You'll think that you're going to influence people, and you might influence some. But is that really what you're trying to do? You're trying to entertain people, make them feel good, and tell them stories that they laugh about. I don't think it's an entertainer that's pro-Republican or pro-Democrat or anything like that. It's like going to a sporting event. I want to see the sporting event. I don't want to hear someone's position on whether they should stand up for the flag or not, or I don't want to be distracted on things like that. And I think that's most of the American public. Sometimes people mess on issues, and we saw that with Budweiser on doing the transgender issues. And I don't know if they've gotten their people back or not. But why get into a controversy? Good business people don't do that. Michael Jordan, they wanted him endorse a Democrat candidate one time, and he said, "Hey, Republicans buy shoes too." He's out to sell some shoes, and I always liked his answer on that. But what was it President Trump said about one of the basketball players? They were talking about politics, and he said they ought to shut up and dribble.
Yeah, Yeah,
and so that's pretty amusing, all that is going on. But Stephen Colbert is gone for the day and will not return.
he had interesting numbers on this. He had a staff of 200 people that produced that show. It cost $100 million to produce. They paid him $20 million, and they were losing annually $40 million on the show.
It goes back, I ought to change the saying of the day, and the saying of the day ought to be, "A fool and their money are soon parted." That is the first thing I taught my children. A fool and their money are soon parted. Why would they think that was going to make them any money if that consistently lost them money? I think some numbers people got into CBS, and they're taking the position, if it makes us money, let's do it. If it doesn't, let's don't do it.
Right.
That's business people, businessmen and businesswomen have to make that decision every day. And you don't see, I've got some friends that are car dealers, but you don't see a sign out in their show window for one candidate or another. They're trying to sell those cars. And that's what a good businessman is going to be doing, not trying to promote a campaign or an ideological viewpoint.
Or tear one down.
Yeah. So it's pretty funny. I want to go over today and talk a little about Disney and the Disney family. And that, I look back that the time that Walt Disney, he was born in 1901, and he died of lung cancer from smoking in 1960-something. He didn't live long, but he was born in Chicago, and his dad was a strong disciplinarian. Some people said that he was too severe. His three brothers, they all left home early, and his sister did. But he tried to leave. He tried to sign up for the Army in World War I, and he couldn't get in because he's 16. He was trying to get away from home, and he finally got in the Red Cross to drive an ambulance in World War I, and that's what he did. Later, his family moved to Missouri, and one thing he had done, even as a child in Chicago, he would draw sketchings and pictures of neighborhood kids and go sell it to their parents. Now, that's pretty good. Will a parent buy a picture of their kid? Yeah, they'll buy it. I one time, my wife and I took our son, Ron, to have his picture made, and the photographer, it's one of those deals you get in the mail, and you come have your picture made, and for, I don't know, it's $5 or something, you get so many prints and so many. We were kind of poor and in law school at the time, but we took him, and the lady was drunk. She wasn't drunk. She was drunk, And, I didn't think we'd ever get the pictures back, but they turned out pretty good. There was a doctor one time in West Texas, they filed on him for being drunk while practicing. Somebody said, he is better drunk than the rest of them were sober. I wouldn't agree with that, but that was that was something.
But that's how Walt Disney started out.
He got started, and he came back more, and he was in Kansas City, and he would draw all kinds of etchings and get the animation, and then he synchronized the sound with the animation of the cartoons, and that's what kicked him off and got him moving. That was his big kickoff. He also had a situation that he had his Oswald the Lucky Rabbit was, and he lost on that, and the people that got it, they took it from him, and some said stole it, and but he later came up with Mickey Mouse, and he wanted a rabbit, so he went back and he'd drawn a rabbit, and they said it's got bug eyes, so he got Bugs Bunny, And so Oswald, how many people have heard of Oswald the Lucky Rabbit? Not many, but how many people have heard of Bugs Bunny? We've all heard of Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse, and Minnie Mouse, and Goofy, and all of them. And so he got moving with that, and now he lost money. He was a true artist and didn't look at it as much that it would make money, as he wanted to see it would be good and the public would like it. And he lost a lot of money on Pinocchio and Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. I've got a side story on that. One time my mother came down to Dimmitt and was going to stay with her kids. We went to a football game, and she was talking about she was going to take them to a movie and everything, and it was a drive-in movie out on the Level-Land Highway, and it was it had Snow White and Seven Dwarfs, and it was a X-rated movie.
Oh no!
I said, oh, Mom, don't take them. That title is misleading. You got to be careful about going to something like that. But we always laughed about that. She's going to take them to something. I'm sure they would have turned her away. At the door. He was always drawing when he was little, and so that preoccupied every thought he had about drawing, about sketching, about the animation, about synchronizing, and no one had been able to do that. In Kansas City, took him up, and he got started there, and then he went on to Hollywood and got all kinds of awards. But the Oswald, the Lucky Rabbit that he had stolen from him, he didn't make it. He was unlucky.
Yeah.
He was the unlucky rabbit.
Probably the best thing that happened to Walt Disney.
Oh, it was. And that I think back to he had a huge success, but he had to borrow money. He borrowed against his insurance policy. He borrowed against his folks' policy. He borrowed everything that he could to try to get by, and that he still was short of money in '55, and ABC came in and loaned him some money. And ABC had started TV, and they were doing well, and it was a success. He did have on his first Disney at Anaheim, which was Disneyland. I get them mixed up sometimes. Disneyland, they had complete chaos on the first day. It was a disaster. Nothing worked right. Nobody picked it. The food wasn't done properly. They just had, and he didn't give up, and he got it straightened out in a couple of weeks, and it went on and did extremely well. I looked at some of the numbers. In 1955, when he started, he had $2.5 million was budget, and had 1,200 employees.
$2.5 million for the park. Wow.
And in 2019, for the parks, they had $3 billion and 77,000 employees.
Wow.
That's
So
a lot of employees.
Their budget was $3 billion.
Yes.
And 77,000 employees. Yeah. Wow.
So they did that in a very fast manner. There is one thing that happened, and this kind of gets in line with the getting politically active on some issue, and hurting your business, there was a bill in the legislature in Florida that you could not teach or talk about homosexuality, heterosexuality, transgender, anything like that in grades K through 3. And I agree with that. I think they ought to be teaching spelling and reading and, silly me, but things that really are current with them. And so they passed that bill that you couldn't do that. And Disney really attacked the government for passing that bill and got involved politically. Well, then DeSantis he passed some legislation that took away special taxes and special privileges that Disney had. And the result of that was some lawsuits. They filed a lawsuit that Disney did. This is pretty funny. They got to be creative, but it didn't work. And everybody that had first-year law school knew it wouldn't. But they said it's a basic violation of their freedom of speech. And they should be able to say whatever they wanted to. And, a law being passed, I mean, the judiciary is going to give a lot of effort to them. If you want to talk about it one way or the other, that's fine. But law was passed, and since then they filed some other suits, and they settled all their suits. And you've seen that on woke policy, the Disney people have gotten away from that, and they're trying to make sure that people come to Disney World or Disneyland or Disney Europe are having a good time, and that the reason that Walt Disney got into the expo business and the theme parks is he had his little girls one time at a carnival, and he saw what a great thrill they got out of the rides and how excited they were and everything. And he thought if you ran this, they'd have a fair in Lubbock, the South Plains Fair, and in Dallas they'd have fair. And so, they didn't have a bunch of PhDs running those shows or running the rides, and a lot of them were really questionable. And so Disney wanted to clean them up, make sure that they were good, and they primarily went after a lot of college-age students. And they were highly successful. I know one time at the state fair, I'd gotten the grandkids all something, and the guy said to me, "Your wife needs something," and I said, "Oh, okay." And what do you? He said, "How about a pair of handcuffs?" we didn't buy a pair of handcuffs. He was kind of out of bounds.
Yeah.
And the little kids looked up. Well, why would it was just kind of crazy. But you'd have at the state fair and in someplace. It's not the same people running the Disney rides,
right?
And they're temporary, and they're not getting them out of college, but. Disney learned, it seemed to me, a lesson of try to stay out of politics. And I'm Republican. I'd be glad for somebody to join in and help or something. But I'm just telling you, for good business people, stay out of it. I mean, there's no win. You're going to make some. I think it goes back to Michael Jordan. He said, well, they won't even endorse a Democrat candidate for president. And he went, Republicans buy shoes. He was interested in selling shoes. Mm-hmm. He made a lot of money on it. Yeah. So it made sense.
And he could make contributions if he wanted to. He just didn't want to be public about it.
Yeah.
Which is fine.
There was an arrest in West Virginia, and a woman that was involved in a love triangle got upset, and at the scene of the I started to say the violation, at the scene of the misunderstanding, she had a pink pistol. A Saturday Night Special is painted pink and didn't look like a pistol, but it shot like a pistol. Mm-hmm. And then one of the other parties had some brass knucks that had a knife attached to it.
Wow.
And you look at that and say, boy, they were armed, weren't they? You know,
Yeah.
Go to a fight and have brass knucks with a knife attached to it, and the other one have a Saturday night special that's pink and looks like a something other than a gun. And that a lot of my friends have dogs, and I saw a stat this week that made me think. Average dog, will poop 274 pounds of poop a year. That's a lot to clean up. You know, I mean, a dog, if you care for a dog and love the dog, you got to, you know, you can't just keep them hemmed up in an apartment all day long.
Right.
And so you got to take care of them, but that's not taking care of them. We also had, last week was National Tattoo Day. And, you know, I go back to my old story about the kid asked me at Texas Tech, you know, do you have any tattoos? And I said, no. And he said, why not? And I said, have you ever seen a bumper sticker on a Bentley? You know, I'm not against them, but a lot of people have tattoos in this day, and which is fine with me. But I was at a wedding, and the people were pretty conservative type people in last week, and there were, you know, two girls in front of us had on sundresses, and they looked like a walking billboard. I mean, they had a lot of tattoos, and so people like them, but erasing them's not real cheap.
No.
And they have of the tattoos, 13 states. The number one tattoo is a name, someone's name, and you know you don't want to put someone's name on there that you're dating. Had about 2 weeks of dates with. And then the second item was hearts. There were 10 states. The number one issue was hearts, and there were 4 that there were cross, 16 flowers. Texas was in one of the ones that had a name, and that's kind of amusing to me that somebody would take the time to do a study on that.
Right? Yeah.
I mean, okay, so what? One other thing, the Boise, Idaho police, they pointed out that they had, and this is the way they said, a serial butt slapper in town. Not a butt slapper, but a serial. And what he'd do, he'd drive by on a bicycle, and he'd pop somebody on the rear end and try to grab their purse when they'd be offended by what he had done and he did 19 in a few days in Boise, and they've got an all-out alert on the serial butt slapper. I'd never heard something, a serial murder, and I understand that and everything, but a serial butt slapper, I kind of chuckled.
Is that more than 3? Is
I don't
it 4?
know. I don't know, but it would be busy.
Chancellor, I know you recently spoke at freshman orientation at Texas Tech. What'd you tell the kids?
I always talk to them and their parents, and I tell them I've got a hot tip on how they can really do school. And they listen up. This is the way you can really do great at school. And I then pause and I say, go to class. And, they look like, oh, well, golly. Mm-hmm. But go to class. You're captured for 50 minutes, no matter what school you go to. And take notes. Make yourself listen and take notes. And that night before you go to bed, read those notes. I'm talking about 5-10 minutes at the most. And for something you don't understand, check on it the next day. But it helps you become a better student. There's no such thing that I've found that's a bad university. We've got great colleges and universities in this country, and there are some bad students. And I tell the parents, you've given us the most valuable thing in your life that you cherish the most for the next 4 years. And then I say, in some cases, it'll be 5 or 6. They all kind of chuckle. Mm-hmm. But try to get out as soon as you can so you save money. And I want them to always feel good about the choice they made. We talk about some of the alumni and things like that. But I think every school tries to have someone talk at the orientation in the summer and talk about you've made the wise choice, and this is considered to be big to us, and we're going to treat it that way. Mm-hmm. And I think back that you lose. You have a child that goes off to college. My wife that she'd see something that his favorite food at the grocery store and almost cry. and that you've been with them for 18 years, mm-hmm. and so it is a change, but it's a welcome change. It's a wholehearted something that you inspire and teach them to do. But I just go back to the class success. If you go to class and you listen a little and pay attention and see the professor when you don't understand something, you're going to do well. Mm-hmm. And you'll make good grades, and it'll help you get in your first job. There are people that have met. I had a guy, Gary Peterson from Houston, that I've had talk to my classes. And Gary is a minority owner of the Astros and the Texans, and he's done extremely well. And so we were interviewing him in front of the class, and I brought up that he was a minority interest of owned a minority interest of the Astros and the Texans, and that had been and made a lot of money. And he interrupted me and said, and I was a C student. When he said that, there were a bunch of guys in the back started applauding. Hey, one of our guys made it. And so, I think that good grades will help you, especially with a big company.
Will you tell, it's one of my favorite stories of yours, about your first day at Tech and your mom had helped you move in and some kid came by and you wanted to drink. Larry. Yes.
Yeah. I was moving into Bledsoe Hall. My mother and dad were helping me. And this guy came by. He had on jeans and a white T-shirt. Didn't have cigarettes rolled up in sleeve, but, some of them did then. And so he was a loud mouth. And you knew he was going to say something that, your mother and dad didn't want to hear or something like that. And he said he had to go or something. He said, I'll come by sometime. We'll go drink some beer. Ooh, that was not what my mother wanted to hear from some prospective student that was going to be living in the dorm with me. And he walked on, and she came around that car, about 45 miles an hour, and said, Larry's a problem. Do not get around him. Stay away from him. He's a problem. I said, I understand. So we got everything unloaded. We got the dorm room looking nice, had the towel hung in the right place, had the bed made, and like it should be, and had a little rug, and had it looking nice. And she said, well, why don't we have a prayer before I leave? And before we leave, and I said, let's make sure, we get this door shut. Don't want to bother people out in the hall, or mm-hmm. I didn't want to be holding hands with my mother and dad doing a prayer and everything. That's shame on me, but at 18 you're awkward. You don't want to do anything that would bring attention to you, that somebody might make fun of you or something. And she prayed a sweet prayer. But at the end of the prayer, she could not leave it alone, and she said, God, keep Larry away from him. I don't know if Larry got killed in a car wreck. I don't know if he transferred to A&M or Texas or someplace, but I never saw him again. She prayed old Larry right out of my life. He be gone, And so that's I think back to moving in, and you get a roommate that, you didn't pick out, mm-hmm. and there's a lot of adjustments for somebody going to college, and your mother doesn't get you up every morning with a breakfast for you, and mm-hmm. you got to show up. You got to go to class, and you got to study and listen in class. I think that's one thing, if they'd just listen, but they daydream a lot of times. Mm-hmm. And you have to fight that, and that's the reason you take notes. If you're taking notes and listening, you're going to have, a great success of having probably an A or B, especially if you read all the assignments ahead of time. At the end of the day, one step for man, one giant step for mankind. And it was from the landing on the moon. And that's been 56 years. Quite a deal.